Alright, torture test motor. Ran this thing on no oil and nitrous. Tons of crank walk. Let's take it apart. So the cam doesn't look that bad. After seeing no oil for, at least 10 minutes, I would definitely use this cam again. Oh, I don't think that's the correct firing order. Oh! Alright, let's get the oil pan off. I don't know what that is. It's really thin though. Oh, there it is. Oh. Knock knock. Who's there? Connecting rod. That's good. Oh. What's left of the cap? Piston did pretty good. Yeah, this is like bone dry. Just so you guys could see the crank. This thing is bone dry. Because it just got so hot. I don't know where all this thin metal is, but it's everywhere. It's all down there. It's really not that bad. Because everything else looks, not to be in great shape, but usable.
All those pieces on the bottom, is that from you?
This?
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah, I still gotta dump it out. That's all from that one side. Ooh. So that's smoked. So, not terrible. I mean, aside from some bluing, not that bad. This whole thing smells like burnt popcorn.
Yeah, I smell it from over here.
Really?
Yeah.
This is the VW factory tool for blown crank removal. It's a 2-piece kit. Block is toast, as you can see. The one cylinder where the rod snapped, chewed it all up. Other ones are fine. They're dirty, but crank journals are okay. Even on the one that exploded. Alright, so that's the block. There's not much else to show. Hopefully you guys could see it pretty well. It's just all marked up inside. So, oh. Oh geez, look at that. I think this one was about to let go too. That thing is just... Oh yeah, geez, look at that. That's gotta be from the crank walk. See it all ground down? You can see from all the crank walk that this whole, yeah, the whole bearing's toast. I mean, okay, so you can see the bearing from no oil is trashed, but then from the crank walk it got ground into the actual rod. See, same thing with this side just gone. Yeah, so this cracked. Who knows that cracked at some point, probably from the heat and no oil. 'Cause that's cracked and totally gone. I think that's where the two bearing halves meet, right there and right there. Crank bearings don't look too bad. Oh, I spoke too soon. Yeah, so the crank bearings are toast too. The rod caps some are scored, some aren't. There's another crank bearing. This one's fine. This one looks like it did pretty well. This one's not bad. You can see all the heat and wear from this on the rod. This one must have definitely spun a bearing on this rod, whichever one this was. I should have done a better job laying this out, but I was fighting getting the crank out because everything was all seized. So just so much metal. That's all got to be from this one. Oh wow, look at that. That thing is gone. That's a combination of the crank walk. Oh, this must be from the side that let go. Because this thing is just freaking mangled. There's all sorts of crud in that galley or that groove. You can see all that crud in the middle, whatever that part of the bearing is called. I guess maybe it's not an oil galley, but the oil passageway, whatever. It's just filled with metal that's like melted in there. Like, I can't dig that out. That's all melted into there. Just for reference, that's what it's supposed to look like. So this one didn't spin, but it did everything else it could have done. Oh, that twisted off like a freaking Tootsie Roll. So that's what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to go all the way up to there. It's supposed to go all the way up to here. So that's sheared clean off. And I'm guessing that came off of... Yeah. Look at that. Must have came from there. Yeah, this is the rod and the piston that let go. So, as you can see, this thing just got destroyed. This is how it's supposed to look. And this is how it does look. Just gone. That's what most of this metal is the piston skirt. So that's what all this big stuff is. Just pieces of piston skirt. I really can't believe this rod didn't snap in half. Alright, so we got the piston here. We got a bunch of the pieces of the skirt. We've got the bent to all hell rod. So for reference, this is supposed to look like this, but it does not. Clip. Here's a circlip for the piston. So definitely there's just chunks everywhere. I mean, give you guys a better idea of how much metal there was. Oh, here's the other circlip. So we do have the two circlips. Just more metal, more metal. There's all this thin metal. I don't know what that is. I think it's a liner that goes on the inside of the piston skirt. There's a lot of this thin metal everywhere. Here goes another piece of the piston, the wrist pin for the piston. There goes another part of another one of these bearings. There, that's got to be what some of this metal is. Some of the other bearings, because on the other pistons, like, they're all discolored and you can see grooves in some of them. This one broke on this one piston, so that one's gone. Those bearings are toast. See, the other cracked half is there, but this is from the one cylinder. So again, for reference, all of this metal is supposed to look like this. Got our bearings here, which should go on the inside of there. So that these wear away and not the actual rod. This is for people who don't know too much about engines. But basically, you've got these are called bearings. And these sit inside of there, and that wraps around here on the crank. And you get oil goes in between the bearing and the crank, made out of different materials that hold up to friction better. But also, say if you're going to rebuild an engine, these are the parts that wear out. You've also got your piston rings up here. These are what slide on the inside of the cylinder walls, and these wear down rather than the piston. So you replace just these. Sometimes when you're rebuilding an engine, you can get away with just replacing rings and not the whole piston. So, but anyways, try not to get too sidetracked here. So these are supposed to protect from the rod and rod caps from wearing down, as long as there's oil in the engine. Now, you don't want this stuff spinning around. When they say, oh, I spun a bearing, that means that these spun free. They're not supposed to spin between the rod and rod cap. They're supposed to be locked into place between the rod cap and the rod, and then only the inside of these bearings are supposed to spin along the crank. So when somebody says, I spun a bearing, they either spun a bearing on the rod, so it starts spinning like that, or they spun a bearing on the crank. So this is the crank bearing. This is what protects the crank from the block. So these lock into place on the block. You've got these little notches in there, with those little notches right up the top here, and those lock into place. You can almost see it. They lock into place right there with that notch, and that's what keeps them from spinning. So, as I was saying, when somebody spins the bearing, they either spun a crank bearing or a rod bearing, and it's no good, because then metal, it's a bad day. I mean, stuff is moving that shouldn't be moving. So hopefully that gives beginners an idea of what I'm talking about, bearings and caps and stuff. So basically what would have happened here is one of these bearings, whether it be, it would have to be the rod bearing in this case, because all of this is where all the damage happened. So my best guess from here, since this doesn't look too bad on the piston, my guess is from no oil, and maybe from even damage from the crank walk, because as I pointed out with this one, this looks like it was damaged from the crank walk. So between the crank walk and no oil, it probably spun a bearing, ate away the metal, probably to the point where there was no bearing left, and then it was just straight up rod on crank. Because if you look here, this is the part on the crank where that piston and rod was. You can see how it's all chewed up. See how it's all chewed up there? And whereas with these ones, I mean, this one has a couple nicks in it, so that's a bad example. But yeah, like right here, you can see this one's a lot smoother. It's all discolored from the heat. There you go, there it is. Yeah, so that's where this mess was on the crank, on the end there, all chewed up. It's pretty obvious that after it broke off and separated from the piston, it was still slapping against the cylinder walls. So that's that. I hope that helps answer some questions to people. Hopefully there's some information you guys were able to grab from that. This is what happens if you run your engine on no oil and nitrous for 15 minutes straight. Overall, I'm pretty freaking impressed. I think it would have kept going, I think that motor would have kept going. I think if we had done some kind of canola oil or whatever oil or lubricant we threw in there, I'm 100% confident that test would have gone on longer than we cared to film it. So, didn't go anywhere near as planned, though it still worked out pretty well. I hope you guys are getting a kick out of it. Leave a comment below what you think.